Today I'm going to be talking about a story, a true case that genuinely scares me to research, read, watch alone. So in the fall of 1986, there was a family, Frank Bowen and his two daughters, Tina and Karen, who were 15 and 9 at the time. They had very abruptly and very suddenly lost their mother to cancer. And it was kind of brought on quite quickly, so it was a shock to the family. Their mom was a working mom, so she brought in the extra income that was needed to keep the family afloat. And of course, when she died, they no longer had that second income. So the father, Frank, would take on as many extra shifts as he could. One night, they are home alone, as they were many, many nights. And they were, just sat together, reminiscing, talking about their mom and how they had this complete disconnect, which I imagine would be hard for any child to feel, especially if they'd lost one of their parents so suddenly. So they are sat, and at one point they decide that they're gonna get the Ouija board out that they already owned, and they would hold a seance to try and connect with their mom. They would just see if they could, call out and find some comfort, I think, in what could be their mom reaching out to them back. Just to feel like she is there, she's within their presence, and so they do. So in that October, they go down to the basement with the Ouija board where they set it up, they sit together. It's quite dark and quiet, and they're quite content. It looks kind of like a game board for anyone who doesn't know. I haven't seen one in real life myself, however. I know that they have letters and numbers across the board and words like yes, no, and there's like a centerpiece that you put your fingers on, and the idea is that it's supposed to kind of sporadically move around the board in response to the questions that you're asking or to the person you're trying to reach out to. So they're sat there for the best part of about an hour just asking, if their mom's there, can she call out, can she reach out, can she, give them a sign that she's just there for them, with them. And after this amount of time, they realise that nothing's happening. It's not really working. They go to bed. Just like any other normal night, they will go to bed, they will go to sleep, and eventually Frank would be home some point later that night. They are both in bed trying to sleep, and at some point during the night, Karen begins to hear tapping noises. She begins to tune in and listen, and so once she starts to feel that kind of unsettling feeling, she musters up the courage and she goes out in to her big sister and asks her, do you hear the tapping noises? I can hear noises. Can you hear this as well? And Tina's like, yeah, I can hear that. And so they're listening for a little while. There is noise, there is something going on, and walk out of the bedroom along the hall, and they're listening as they go, and they can still hear this tapping noise. And they get to the top of the stairs, and they actually start to feel like this could be Mum. This could be what we've actually been hoping for earlier that night, and the seance worked. So they call out, Mom, is that you? Are you here with us? And they hear tap, tap, tap. They truly, truly believe that this is their mom that's, reaching out to them just as they had reached out to her. So They are asking different questions and calling out and asking her to give them a sign, you know, keep on tapping, asking different questions. So they're following these tapping noises, and it brings them to the door of their basement, which they know is dark, and I think basements are a little bit scary anyway. So they are kind of frozen to the top of the basement. The door is open, they're looking down, and the tapping completely stops. There's no more tapping. There's no more reaction or response to them trying to communicate with their mom. And so they just accept that that's exactly what it is. You know, they are absolutely made up and so excited that they've been able to, you know, just feel the comfort in the fact that although they've lost their mom, in reality, she's actually there with them. She's around. And so they are quite excited. You know, they can't sleep. They're really giddy about it, and they're talking about it, and they go to the kitchen and they stay up waiting for their dad, Frank, to get home from work, because they're excited. They can't wait to tell him, you know, that this is the events of the night. This is what's happened, and they're super excited about it. And so eventually Frank finishes work, he comes home, and the girls rush to him to tell him that this amazing thing has happened. And once they tell him, he kind of accepts what they're saying, but doesn't actually believe that this is what's happening. They're just kind of dealing with their grief of losing their mom, and the case is just simply that in their mind, they believe that they heard it, but in reality, it's a very, very slim chance that it's actually happened. And so he tells them, you know, of course, that's amazing. Your mom is always around, and she loves you very much. And so they retire to their bedrooms where they all fall asleep. This tapping continues for several days, you know, and they just kind of feed into it as they truly believe that it's their mom. And it's not just coming from the basement anymore. You know, they're hearing it sporadically all over the house. They're hearing it from the kitchen and the second floor, just all around the house. This tapping noise is coming, and they can hear it. They know they can hear it, the two of them together. And every time they call on their dad, there's absolutely nothing. It just falls on silence. He doesn't hear it. He doesn't experience it with them. And so he just passes it off continuously that it's just the girl's way of coping with their grief. It's their coping mechanism, and he accepts that and doesn't really think too much of it. However, they start to hear tapping noises mainly in their bedroom at night time, kind of from their closets, under their beds, and it starts to really spook them. They don't feel like it's mum anymore because it's giving them this eerie sense, and they are scared. They are scared that now it's really discomforting, and they feel like maybe the seance did work, but it's not mum that's come through. It's not our mom that's trying to communicate with us. It's something dark and quite bad. Frank begins to pick up that it's not such a good thing anymore. They're not just, you know, happy and dealing with their grief in their own way together. The girls start to find any excuse to be out of the house. They will stay at friends' houses, and they really don't want to be alone at night, especially when Frank is working. So after 3 days of trying to console the girls, his daughters, that, you know, everything's fine, nothing bad is happening, these tapping noises aren't really happening, it's not really real, it's nothing to worry about, and they should just, you know, not worry about it and just move on. But the girls continue to hear these tapping noises coming from all over the house, and they don't want to be there. They really don't want to be there alone. But one night in the October, they are home alone. They don't have any friends' houses to go to. they have to stay home. Although they are together, Frank, their dad, is not there. He is working, and they are sat in the living room. Everything seems to be fine and normal, and then they began to hear the tapping noises coming from the basement. They kind of muster up this courage that, you know, they never really investigated it in the first place. They just believed that it was their mom. And then once it turned kind of sour, they were too scared to go and investigate. So they never did. Nobody did. The older sister is convinced that she is going to go and confront this. She's going to go and see what is actually going on, where this noise is coming from, and if they can figure out exactly why the house is tapping, making noise. So Tina is confident that she's going to go and investigate with her younger sister trailing behind her. She grabs a knife from the kitchen and they both wander down into the basement where the tapping noises are coming from. And it's dark, it's dreary, it's pretty scary, but nothing is out of the ordinary. It's just their normal basement. They can no longer hear any tapping noises. Nothing is actually going on down there. It's just their washer, their washing machine, their tumble dryer, and not much else. There's nothing there that will explain what these noises are. After a few minutes, they kind of accept that they're not going to get any answers, and they turn to leave the basement, go upstairs, and as they do, as they're walking up the basement, they see something that they definitely did not see on the way down there. And that is on the wall, written on the wall in the basement, it says, "I'm in your closet, come and find me." The girls are horrified, totally terrified, run up the stairs of the basement and straight out of their house to their neighbour's house, where they are kind of banging on the door. And when they open up their door, they explain exactly what's been going on over the past several days. And they explain that they have gone down into the basement and they've seen this horrible message written on their basement wall. And the neighbours kind of consoles them and says, you know, everything's fine, you stay here, you wait for Frank, their dad, to get home from work, and then we'll explain the situation. And so the girls are there. Eventually their dad comes home from work, where the neighbour goes out, flags them down, explains that the girls are at their house and that they are just inconsolable. They believe something is going on in the house and that there's this written message on the wall. And Frank goes into the girls and he speaks to them. They are, you know, crying, they're totally shaken, and they explain that, you know, this is what's happened that night. They have gone down to the basement, the message is on the wall, and they believe that their house is being truly haunted by something evil, by something horrible. And Frank tells them, you know, everything is fine, don't worry, stay here, I will go check, I'll go see what's going on. He goes into the house, he kind of checks as he's walking through, he can't see nothing seems out of the ordinary, and he goes to the basement where, again, there is nothing out of the ordinary. There's nothing out of place, it's just the washing machine, the tumble dryer, and as he turns to go back upstairs, he does see the message on the wall, but it's written in ketchup, so he just kind of shrugs it off as the girls are playing tricks. This is the girls. They are no longer having this kind of almost healthy relation to their way of coping with their grief and the loss of their mom. It's actually a really bad thing now. And he tells them, once he goes back, that this is really unhealthy, this is not normal. You know, I know this is you, I know you did this. And the girls are crying, they're upset, they're trying to explain that it wasn't them. Something horrible is happening and they don't know how to explain it. And their dad only comes up with his explanation that they're just not coping, they are grief stricken, and he believes that they should then go and see a grief counsellor. So the next day, the girls agree, they just accept that their dad is he's not understanding, he's not believing them, and they go to see this counsellor. And everything seems to be going well. When they get back to the house, everything seems normal. There's no more tapping sounds. There's nothing else going on. There's no kind of weird activity. And they start to feel like they're getting back to normal life. They are happy. Until one evening in December, Frank has taken the girls out. They've had a bit of a night out. And one of their friends, Kathleen, has come out with them. As they get back to the house, Frank is walking with the girls to the door, and he kind of looks up and sees that there's lights on in different rooms of the house, and he kind of thinks to himself that that's a bit weird. He was certain he turned all the lights off before they left, and he kind of looks back at the girls like, have they done this? Is this everything starting back up again? But he's kind of confused at the whole situation because he left with them, he come back with them, they've been with him all night. So could it have been them in reality? And instead of facing it with, the reality and the seriousness of the situation, he's just confused because of, the previous things that have been happening, and he believes it was all the girls. So he puts the key in the lock, he opens the door, and he goes in, and he's kind of confused, dazed, wandering around, and the TV's on, and it's blaring, the radio's on, and a few things just seem out of place. He goes over, he turns the TV off, he turns the radio off, and he's kind of looking back at the girls again, like, this is just so odd. Could it be them? Couldn't it be them? He's kind of walking around, just totally confused. And he checks the house as he's going along. There's nothing there. And he goes up to the second floor. He checks the second floor, and again, there is nothing there. There's nothing going on. He checks the attic, and he comes down, checks the basement. Everything's normal. There's nothing there. And then he remembers there's a room off the front of his house that he didn't check. This room in the front of the house, the window kind of area, the front of their house. And as he goes into the room, the girls are huddled behind him, absolutely terrified. As he walks in, he sees that written on the wall in shaving cream, it says, "Marry me." And totally shocked, he walks over and he's kind of staring at this like, what on earth is going on? As he's staring at this and kind of looking back at the girls, and they are absolutely terrified, they're all huddled together, they're all huddled up next to Frank, he hears like movement in the closet behind him. So as he turns to look, see where this noise is coming from, and as he turns, he can't really see much because the doors are open, it's really dark. And then out wanders this man holding a hatchet in his dead wife's dress with like white clown makeup over his face, and he is just slowly walking towards them with this hatchet. And he just, this guy that's come out holding this weapon, he just points at Frank and goes, "You and the girls go upstairs." And terrified, they do that. They kind of huddle together, they walk out. This guy's following them up the stairs, closely behind. Frank is in between this guy and his daughters and the daughter's friend, and they get up to the bedroom door, and he's kind of nudging them into the bedroom, and the girls walk in. And as Frank is in the doorway about to walk in, he grabs hold of the door, slams it shut behind him, and he's kind of leant up against the door, and there is like a struggle. This guy's pushing on the door trying to get in, and Frank is trying to hold the door to make sure he doesn't get in. And in the midst of this, Tina has this thought, and she just turns, runs towards the window, leaps out of the window from the bedroom, lands on the floor, kind of gets up, runs over to the neighbour's house, and she's pounding on the door. She explains that there's someone in the house, there's someone with a weapon. He's in the bedroom with my dad and the girls. And they phone the police. They realise that this is a real situation. It's a serious situation. He phones the police there and then. And as the police turn up, Frankie's like half hanging out of the window, screaming that there's a guy in the house. He was just in the bedroom with us. He's in the house. And the police rush in. They get Frank and the girls down to safety and kind of have them stand to the side. And they go in and search the whole house and do not find anybody. You know, nobody's there anymore. This guy is nowhere to be seen. He must have fled. And as they go to the back door, the hatchet that he was kind of wielding is there. The back sliding door is slightly open. So they kind of come to this conclusion that this guy must have been here. You know, it's a horrific story that they're explaining. He must have been here, but he must have fled out of the back door. So they go to Frank and they explain that's what they believe. You know, we've searched the whole house. There's nobody here. If there was, kind of thing, they're not here anymore. But because of what's happened, it's probably the best option and the safest option to go and stay with friends or family, just in case this guy comes back. They're kind of left with no answer as to what's happened, who this guy was. You know, Frank completely believes the girls now about what's been happening because he has seen it and experienced it himself. And they go and stay with a family for about 2 weeks. And at this point, nothing else has happened. You know, the police have not explained that they've caught this guy or anything's been going on with the house. Nobody's been in or out. There's no kind of activity going on that they can see. And the police are watching his house 24/7 in case this guy comes back. And like I said, after 2 weeks, Frank is confident that he should be able to go back to the house. He needs to get like some bits that him and the girls need. And once he is driving down towards the house, he sees that there's no police car stationed outside. There's no sign of any police. And he thinks it's a bit unusual because they did say they will be watching his house 24/7. And he gets out of his car. He's walking up towards the house, and kind of out of the side of his eye, he sees what he believes is movement within the house. He's sure that he can see someone moving within the house upstairs on the second floor. And instead of going in, he goes to his neighbours again and he calls the police from the house and just says, hey, you know, are the police doing checks inside the house? I'm sure I can see someone. And they tell him, no, we are only stationed outside. We've only been watching the house from the outside. Nobody has gone in the house and nobody should be in the house. And he tells them, you know, I'm sure I've seen someone. And they say, you know, it must just be the changeover. A police car will turn up. One must have just left and another one is starting their shift. He'll be there soon. And sure enough, police come. They do arrive shortly after. And once they turn up, Frank explains that I'm sure I've just seen someone on the second floor. But they tell Frank to go and wait at the neighbour's house. And once they walk in, they cannot actually believe what they are seeing. So once they walk into the house, once they walk into the living room area, they see that the house is in complete disarray. There is like champagne glasses all over the living room. The furniture has all been moved around and the house is all like been turned upside down. When they look up, they see that there's pennies that have been glued all to the ceiling. And as they're walking around, the family photographs that are placed up on the walls and things like that, knives have been like driven into the photographs, and they're in like the part of the photograph where Karen or Tina are, and above the picture is written, I will kill you Tina, I will kill you Karen. Also, they realise that someone must have gotten back into the house. This is 100% real. Someone must have been there that night when Frank called the police. And so they go out, they go outside of the house. They call him for, backup and things. And once more police get there, they do a thorough search of the house, literally from top to bottom, and they don't find anything at all. There's no evidence of anyone there. There's no evidence of anyone coming in or out of the house. The police have been outside the house 24/7, have not seen anybody come or go. It was snowing in the area as well, not too long before, and as they're checking around the perimeter of the house, there's no footsteps, the snow has not been disturbed, so they just cannot fathom how this is even possible. Something crazy and totally weird is happening, and they just have no explanation to it. And the police are kind of downstairs. They are stood in the basement, kind of chatting amongst themselves about how weird this is and how they just don't understand. And one of the police officers has his hand rested against the washing machine, and as he's kind of talking away, he kind of jolts as the washing machine moves slightly, and it creates this kind of gap between the washing machine and the tumble dryer. And he sees that there is this hole in the wall behind where these appliances have been. And he goes down and he kind of shines his torch, and they kind of have a look and start to investigate. And as they look through this hole, it kind of burrows round into the tunnel behind the wall of the basement. And they see that there's all these kind of areas where it's been burrowed through behind the walls and upstairs onto the second floor. And as they kind of poke their head right round and look further down into where this the tunnel from the hole goes, they see this man crouched down with the hatchet over his face in this kind of white, scary, clown-looking makeup, in women's clothes, staring back at the police officers. This man that is pulled out of the hole in the basement wall is actually 16-year-old Danny Laplante. It turns out he had a very brief interaction with Frank's daughter, who he went to the same school as. That was Tina. He was kind of an outcast and a recluse within school, but 6 months prior, he kind of felt like he made a pass at Tina and she had rejected him. Although she was very, very polite, he felt totally rejected by her. And so he decided to break into the girl's home, make this hole in the wall and burrow all these tunnels within the house behind the walls where he could kind of slither along and then create all these tapping noises and kind of mess with the girls, because he was there in the basement hiding when they had conducted this seance where they had tried to communicate with their mother. And so he took this opportunity to mess with the girls as if their mother had been communicating back with them, and started tapping in the basement. And as he's seen that the girls are reacting to this, he then took more of a sinister turn, and he would create these tapping noises further up in the second floor of the house. Although he couldn't actually get behind the walls further up, he would have to leave the walls, leave the basement, creep around the house at night while they're all in bed, and hide in closets and things, and then create these tapping noises that would then turn into this terrorizing situation for the girls. Once they would call Frank and, kind of scream out or go and get him, he would then hide again. He'd be gone, and then there's no evidence of anything happening. And this is why Frank did not believe him, because he couldn't hear anything, because all the tapping noises would completely stop once Frank was in the room or the area that they was happening in. So once Danny was pulled out of the wall, he was arrested, he was taken into custody, and he was actually released on bail. And I think it was around 10 months later, he broke into another family's home, no reason to do so, just as if he just picked a random family home. He broke in and murdered 3 members of that family. I believe it was the mother and 2 young children. And he was later found and arrested and given 3 life sentences for the 3 murders that he had committed. And to this day, as far as I know, he is still in prison. He applied for parole, which was denied. But during his parole hearing, it was determined within the court that he was one of the most psychopathic inmates within the prison system, which I think, given his actions prior, it's very, very clear that he was not really all there. So I had a look into Danny Laplante's background. According to different sources, it is believed that he grew up with not such a good life. His mother and father divorced. It's said that there was abuse and neglect within the household, and Danny would later go on to accuse members of his family and his psychologist of abuse. Although that is not a reason to go on and commit what he committed and do all the things he did. But it's worth, I think, noting that he had some problems in his early childhood. So who knows? But yeah, this is one of the stories that really just sends a shiver down my spine and makes me run up the stairs at night and listen a bit more closely when I can hear normal house noises at night time. So yeah, that's the end of the story. That's the end of that case, and I hope to see you for the next one.